Okay, hello, everyone. We are joined with Billie Simmons, CEO of Crucible and former COO of Daylight, which is a neobank building financial tool for the LGBTQIA plus community. So in this fireside chat, we are going to be discussing how building innovative products for underrepresented communities and driving venture scale success for those communities. So Billie is going to share her experience on raising 20 million for Daylight, navigating highly regulated industries like banking and healthcare, and rapidly iterating to reach product market fit, which we all know is so important. So in this chat, you're going to get to reframe your thinking to develop quick solutions, secure buy-in from industry incumbents, and disrupt legacy systems. And we're going to try to do it all in 30 minutes. So Billie, welcome. How are you? Good to see you.
Thank you for having me, Hunter. I'm very well, thank you. Excited to try and fit this all into 30 minutes.
We'll do, but then we'll just have to have you back. So
Exactly.
yeah. So I read a bit about your bio there. Is there anything else you want to share and just let us into Billie's world a little bit before we jump in?
I've been very heads down the last 6 months building my new company, Crucible, which just came out of stealth. I also got married last month, so it has been kind of a hectic time, both in my personal and professional life, but really wonderful.
Awesome. Well, congrats on all fronts.
Thank you.
So I'd love to kick it off a little bit about Daylight. So Daylight focuses on the LGBTQIA plus community. I talked a little bit about that. Tell me a little bit more about Daylight and what were the key challenges and opportunities you encountered when building for this niche audience?
So, Daylight was my last company. We ran it from 2020 to 2023 and then exited to Atlas. And so it was a wild ride of 3 and a bit years of trying to build truly inclusive financial services, particularly focused in areas around trans inclusion. So we built the world's first debit card that allowed trans people to put whatever name they wanted on their debit card, and rebuilt the entire KYC and bank onboarding process to be inclusive and to not unnecessarily dead name trans people. And so obviously that was like a big shift in the industry, and a big part of our platform was around advocating for other banks and other financial institutions to do the same, because we felt that this shouldn't be a differentiating feature for Daylight. This should be something that everyone does because it's the right thing to do. Depending on who you ask and depending on people's lived experience, the LGBT community is either a very large or a very small community. The reality is there's about 40 million LGBT people in the United States, $1 trillion of spending power, which is roughly the size of Mexico or California. So it's actually an incredibly powerful, incredibly large community. But it is also an incredibly diverse community, right? Like the thing I always used to say was, the unique thing about the LGBT community is it exists alongside every other possible intersection. So every race, every ethnicity, every ability, every gender, like all of it, all of those kinds of people can be LGBTQ as well. And that's actually incredibly challenging from a product perspective. Traditional startup wisdom says build for one very specific, very niche audience. And that isn't really 40 million people. Like, it needs to be like one part of it. But the difficulty is when you're building inclusive services, and the sort of the traditional wisdom is to exclude people from your product initially. How do you kind of navigate that? And I wish I had like a good kind of answer or solve for it. I think the closest I got to an answer was keeping an eye on the prize and understanding that the eventual goal is truly inclusive services. But the way to get there is probably not to try and please everyone simultaneously, or to not even build for everyone simultaneously. And I think for a lot of people, that's a very uncomfortable feeling. And I think you just have to accept that if you want to build for that community, you kind of have to accept that discomfort, or try and prove me wrong. I would love to be proven wrong, of course. But there's many examples. I even think of like Grindr, for example. Obviously started just for gay men, but over the last couple of years have slowly expanded their audience to trans people and queer people in general. And I think that's often the way that you're going to have to do it when building for the LGBT community. In terms of opportunities, I mean, I think there's, it is, if you are building for a community that is underserved, they're going to be incredibly happy and excited that you're building for them. Potentially skeptical as well, but I think particularly if you're part of the community you're building for, it can be really rewarding to build, for yourself and for your own community. It's really useful for hiring, people that are mission driven and want to help, again, their community. I think all of that can be really powerful. So, pros and cons overall, but I'm sort of doing it again with Crucible insofar as we're focusing on surrogacy and egg donation. So, a quote unquote niche community and a niche product. So I think it's the way to go ultimately.
Yeah, tell me a bit about Crucible, your new endeavor.
Crucible is building intelligent tools for third-party fertility agencies. We're trying to reduce the risk for everyone involved. So that is egg donors, gestational carriers, case managers, intended parents, everyone involved in this incredibly complex process of bringing a baby into the world through surrogacy and egg donation. It's highly prone to error and to delay and to additional cost. And you have these incredible case managers whose job it is to try and pull off these insane heroics in order to make the journey happen. And we believe that, that technology can allow us to take the burden off case managers and intended parents, and again, everyone involved, and make this process more standardized, more automated, where it makes sense for it to be automated, not taking the humans out of this process, but making it just easier for them to go through this process. In our final year of Daylight's existence, we pivoted into third-party fertility services because we realized that, the LGBT community are, sort of a de facto audience for third-party fertility. If you want to have a kid as a queer couple, chances are you will need some kind of assisted reproductive technology. And it's a huge financial burden on that community as well. It's a huge financial burden on anyone that goes through it. What I learned later with Crucible is that actually a ton of non-LGBT people are also going through surrogacy and egg donation. Average cost of a surrogacy is $250,000. And so, if as a financial institution, as Daylight, we were really focused on trying to help people afford it and try and figure out, how do they manage the cost, as well as the incredibly complex logistics. At Crucible, we're focused on the logistics first, but I do think that a huge part of this that comes with increasing accessibility and reducing stress and risk is going to be around the financing part of it. Like, how do we make this more financially accessible for the everyday person? Because fertility rates are only going down, and so we really see this as like a future need and frankly an existential problem for the human race.
Yeah, I mean that stopped me in my tracks.
Mhm.
So I'm noticing a theme here between your two companies of financial burdens on the LGBTQ plus communities, and you're trying to solve that in these different ways. Why? Where did that come from?
I suppose ultimately my own lived experience. I'm part of the LGBT community. I plan to build my family through surrogacy in the future. Obviously, I just got married, so it's a very top of mind, this process. And I think the easiest way to build solutions for really complex problems is to have experienced them firsthand. And I remember way back when we were first conceiving of Crucible, my co-founder Rob called me and just asked me to like complain about the US banking system to him. And when I was chatting to him, I realized that all of these horrible experiences I'd gone through when changing my legal name and changing my legal gender, and how that affected my bank account, how that affected my credit score, how that made me feel unsafe. I was like, I can't believe I've just like accepted this as the status quo. Obviously, something's got to be done about this, and no one else is doing anything about it. And the same is true with with the third party fertility space. It's agencies and case managers are doing their best, and really there are many good actors within the space. There are also many not so good actors in the space, and surrogacy as a whole is such a difficult and confusing process to come to as an intended parent. And so when I've actually started to think about, okay, how am I going to do this? Like, how do I tell which agency is a good one? How do I know I'm going to be treated well? What do you mean there's a $40,000 non-refundable fee just to get started with an agency? Um, I'm feeling these things firsthand, and so it makes it actually quite easy for me to build these solutions, because I'm just building the ideal experience of what I would want as a consumer. My co-founder for Crucible has been an egg donor, and so she really, acutely understands what this process is like and how stressful and difficult it was to donate her eggs, which shouldn't be a stressful and difficult thing for a donor to do. They're already, putting their bodies on the line to help other people have children. We should be making this as easy and joyful and stress-free as possible. And same with case managers. My co-founder also has been a case manager. And so she understands, again, the stress that case managers are under, the personal heroics that they're asked to pull off, the boundaries that get blurred when you're emotionally supporting someone through such a complex medical process. And we want to help these people because we've experienced it firsthand.
Yeah. And I've talked to her about this, about talking about it. And, I have a family member that went through this and something terrible happened and all of the eggs were lost. The freezer broke.
Oh my
And
gosh.
not just for her, it was for, whole, I don't know how big they are, but it was a lot, right?
Yeah.
So she had to go through the whole process over again. And it's just absolutely horrible. And then luckily, she did have, and then they got pregnant the old-fashioned way.
Mm.
And then they used the eggs for the second one, which they're both beautiful now. And then later, there's these leftover eggs, and my partner and I don't have any kids. And at one point, she's like, "Do you want some eggs?" And I was like, "For breakfast? What are you talking about?" It was out of context. I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, well, I'm working out my trust." And I was like, well, sure. Yeah. I mean, not right now, but thank you. But it was just holding, space for her when all of that was going on. It was just horrific what was going on. It's awful. So it's
Yeah.
wonderful to hear that you're looking at building the support for people through those trying times. And it's for not just for the parents, but it sounds like everyone involved.
Yeah, it's essentially a piece of software that agencies, these fertility agencies, buy and provide to egg donors and intended parents, sort of on our behalf. We manage that experience for everyone, or we also just help with the logistics of it. Right, it's on average 250-step process with 10 plus vendors. Currently, that's largely managed through email and Excel spreadsheets. And so, providing a single source of truth for everyone to, as I like to say, sing off the same hymn sheet. I grew up as a choir singer, if you couldn't tell. That is powerful in and of itself. Case managers get into this line of work because they want to give back. Often they are previous donors or previous gestational carriers, and they want to help other people go through this process. They're not there to book travel and to do, annoying admin and wrangle clinics. They're there to emotionally support people through this process. We want to free up their time so that they can do that really important job, because it is an incredibly emotional, often grief-laden process. And it's really, really expensive. And that adds a really, really difficult element on top of all of this. It's a lot of stress for the intended parents going through it. Nearly 2/3 of intended parents that start surrogacy journeys give up halfway through because it's too difficult or too expensive. Those people deserve to have the families that they want.
Yeah. Did you have a background in finance? You're really on the mission to help people with that.
Sort of. I have a music degree, so it wasn't kind of my sort of original plan. But I've worked in fintech for a lot of my career. So I taught myself to code when I was very young, and that's kind of always just been my way into various places. And when I moved to New York about 10 years ago, I fell into the fintech world, and just love it, because I think that it is a community of people who are really, really optimistic about their ability to make meaningful change in this like
Mhm.
very large, incumbent-laden, powerful industry. And they're doing it. There's great examples. Like I always think about Chime got rid of overdraft fees, and that made all the other banks get rid of their overdraft fees. By building this innovative fintech solution, they were able to create real systemic change that improved consumers' lives.
Mhm.
Um, I want to do that too. Like I don't have a necessarily a background in finance, but I've worked in these spaces long enough to understand how to move through them and how to work, and also to understand where I don't know enough, and to bring in an expert like my co-founder who has, she worked at Carrot Health before this. She's really in the fertility space. And there are times where like my sort of, I call it my weaponized naivete, actually is really useful, because I'm asking questions like, why can't we do this?
Yeah.
And pushing those boundaries is hard to do when you already know, or already think that everything's gonna not work out, because you're so in the community and in the industry already.
I love weaponized naivete. I feel like that's what I get to do here at this job all the time. I'm like,
Mm,
I don't know anything about what you do. Let's talk about it.
yeah, no, it's exactly. There's something very powerful about being, the number of like high profile conversations I've gotten myself into with real like intelligent, like impressive people in the space. Um, they like, because I've basically emailed them and been like, I don't know anything about this and I'm trying to do something about this. Will you talk to me? You can learn a lot of very powerful information by just
Mhm.
asking impressive and powerful people for advice, because everyone loves to give advice.
And everyone loves to talk about themselves.
Exactly. And so you can weaponize that, I suppose. I'm
Yeah.
not sure I like the word weaponize in that context, but you can
Yeah,
certainly
yeah,
use
yeah.
that to your advantage.
For
Utilize
sure.
it.
Yeah. Utilize it. Yes,
Yeah.
utilize it. So why the name Crucible?
It's yes, it's definitely a polarizing name, but I love it, and we're going to make a bit more of a splash around like why this name, because once you hear, I think it will make sense to you, because I think Crucible has all of these different connotations. There's like the Crucible, like the book,
Yeah,
and
as a
there's kind of
theater kid, my head went to like witch hunts. Yeah.
yes, yes, exactly. It's kind of biblical, but a crucible is also a device used in chemistry, and it is a tool, almost like a bowl that is made of a material that allows it to be heated, and allows the items in the bowl, in the crucible, to be heated to very high temperatures, and it withstands a ton of pressure. And as a result, people use it to do things like create new alloys, to combine metals together. And so the crucible is a device through which you make things that are stronger than their parts. And we thought that was, basically what we're doing, right? Like we are the sort of the tool through which a ton of pressure is put through, in order to help bring life into the world. And yeah, so it works. And if you're a science nerd, it doesn't work as well if you're a theater nerd. I'm also a theater nerd, so said with love.
Yeah, no, I got that. If you had a background in music.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow, that is fascinating. I never knew the definition of that word in that context. Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. You can also probably tell that my co-founder who came up with the word, Laura, has a neuroscience degree from Stanford, and is very sciencey, very technical, very brilliant all around. So
Those are the,
I hate naming things. She came up with it. I
uh,
was like, this is great. This works. Let's
oh,
go for
that's
it.
really interesting. My co-founder is also a neuroscientist, but I'm the namer because I have like the marketing languagey stuff.
Yeah.
And then he'll go down the rabbit hole with me of like what else it could mean.
Yeah. I like that. Everyone has their roles in these dynamics, but
Right?
I,
Right, right.
I'm more of like a visual person. I care a lot about how things look and how they're experienced.
Uh-huh.
Um, words are kind of my strong suit, but like naming things has never been kind of my passion.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense because what you're talking about too is like user experience. And what you're trying to do is make a smoother experience for people to go through a really complicated process.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Ultimately, I care. I mean, so does to be clear, so does my co-founder very, very deeply. But, we are united on this feeling of wanting to make this experience better. And everything we do is focused on, yeah, how does this feel to go through? How does this look? How does this feel? How are we thinking about the user's emotional state throughout this,
Mm.
and getting ahead of that? And providing tools at kind of opportune moments when we know someone is feeling a certain way. I think that can be really, really powerful.
Absolutely. So for all of our developers, founders, startups listening in, you're talking about making a smoother experience for the users. And a lot of work goes into that. And there's a lot of work underneath to make that happen. So when you're building something from scratch and you have to get an MVP out there quickly, it's the minimum viable product, right? And it's crucial to understand what your market fit is. So I'm curious, what frameworks or mindsets do you use when you're trying to test and validate solutions rapidly without sacrificing quality or user trust or not speaking to the right people, right? Because that's what we were talking about, to bring it full
Yeah.
circle there. That's what that market fit is. How do you navigate that? Because it's a lot to juggle.
It is, yes. I think you said it best. Finding the right test audience is really, really crucial. I think this is not new wisdom by any means. I'm really bad at all the startup books, but it's like the bridging the gap one, or crossing the chasm. Um, this idea of early adopters, I think, is really, really powerful. You are never going to be able to build a 100% perfect product from the get-go. Even if it's like functionally perfect, it's probably not going to look that great. And if it is 100% perfect, you've probably launched too late. Maybe you have oodles of cash to sit on and you can take your time. But most startups, your sort of biggest limiting factors are money and time. You have to get stuff out really, really quickly, and learn really, really quickly. And so I actually think this is an incredible time in sort of history to be doing this kind of work. Um, I have my skepticism about AI tools. I will say that, spinning up MVPs on Cursor, or on Claude, or any of these like AI tools has been kind of life-changing, because you can get an MVP together if you kind of like know what you're doing enough. I can spin together an MVP in a couple of hours. And it's like a clickable, functional MVP. It may not be like the nicest, cleanest code, but it's enough to test, and it's enough to get it out in front of people and to learn, and then go back and like perfect it. So that's been huge for us. I mean, I built our first MVP for Crucible that secured us our agency pilot in a week. And that was, I'm not a super, like, I've been a software engineer for like 1 calendar year. And I can code and stuff, but I'm by no means like, I'm never going to be like a CTO of a company or anything like that. But I can, I know roughly what I'm doing. And then AI kind of fills in the gaps for everything else. And it's pretty incredible. We have an engineer on staff that is actually building the sort of robust production quality version of this. So I think that's worth saying, like, keep that in mind. But yeah, I think getting stuff out really quickly, what that also did was prevent me from attaching to the product. I think this can be a really sort of bad thing that can happen to a lot of people, where the first thing you build, if you put a ton of effort and time and sweat and blood and tears into it, and you don't get the feedback you want, you're like, well, I've put so much effort into this, and so I don't want to get rid of it, and so I just need to I need to keep pushing or find someone else that likes it. If you've done your job right with finding the right user, and and you feel that these are the right users, if they don't like it or they don't use it, you need to listen to that and you have to scrap it. And if you've built the thing in a week, you don't care if you've scrapped it. That's like a week. It's not so bad. If you spent like 6 months building it, you're going to feel really, really bad about that. So yeah, the focus on the word minimum, pre AI, and for those that are not super comfortable with AI, there is so much you can do in like tools like Typeform and Fillout. I last summer I worked with a climate tech company that had a really complex product that they wanted to build out, that did all of this, mapping, and it was emissions stuff, and helping them figure out like this pipeline of upgrades for these factories. But the first thing they had to do was collect a bunch of data. We could either spend 2 months working with a dev shop to build out this like complex onboarding app, or I can build it in Typeform in like one day. And so, yeah, like don't be afraid to use really basic tools to kind of get to where you want. The goal is actually, I think, to get to no, I don't want this, because that gets you closer to the thing that is going to work. If you get people here are my sort of red flag words. This is really interesting. What you're doing is so important. This is really cool. If your user's saying something like that, that usually means they don't want to use it. It means that they think it's a cool idea, but the proof is in the pudding. Don't just show it to them, ask them to use it. And if they use it, ask them to pay for it. And then if they pay for it, then you have product market fit. If they just think it's cool, and this is true of like investors, this is true of everyone that has any kind of ability to supercharge your product. If they think it's like interesting or important, I imagine I'm talking to a lot of people who are doing stuff that is mission driven. You will hear that like, this is so important what you're doing all the time. Those people don't understand the value of what you're doing. The green flag words are, how much is this? When can I start using this? Is it ready to go right now? If you hear those words, then you are onto something. Yeah, I think those are pretty much all my notes. Make sure you have the right audience. Build quickly. Don't be too particular about like the tools you're using. Just get to the experience that you want. Most apps start kind of the same. They're all just like collecting data and spitting it out in some way. And then avoid people that say your work is important.
I love this, Billy. That's such good advice. Well, we're about out of time. We need to wrap up. So I'm curious, being a founder twice now can be very stressful, can be very intense. And I'm curious, are you I need to be pumped up or I need to be calmed down kind of person? And what do you do to find that balance for yourself, for the Billy to get centered and go work through the day?
There's definitely different modes that I have to lock into. If I'm coding or if I'm building something or doing some kind of focused work, I've actually created a sort of sleeper agent effect in myself, which is that I listen to this one specific artist called Shalou, who does kind of upbeat house music. And literally, if I hear that music now, I just like lock in. I'm like super focused. I've done it so many times over the years that my sort of brain and body knows what that music means. So I guess tip number one, program yourself to be productive. Before calls, I actually like to kind of dance or like to move around a bit, get the heart rate pumping. I have a degree in pop music, so I love Rebecca Black's new album. I love Lady Gaga's new album. I love Doechie's new album. Anything that is kind of powerful and upbeat. That's usually what gets me going before a call or before like something like what we're doing right now. Yeah, so those are kind of my two modes, and then in the evening it's usually I have a playlist called Vibes, which is just like slow, steady acoustic music that kind of brings me down from that feeling. Because if I don't do some work to reintegrate sort of out of work mode, I will dream my work. It's clear that it's important for your brain to switch off and to have other things to do than just work all the time. So that's my take, at least. I'll probably never get into YC, but that's okay.
So this was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming by. Your work is so important. Thank you for not kidding.
Signing off.
But truly, thank you so much. Please come back. There's always more to talk about. This has been a delight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.